Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to this Halloween edition of 100 Days of Code. No, I'm only joking, nothing really spooky about this one, unless you're afraid of code, but we will get you through that together. So we're here to learn code together. It's day 42. Welcome back. It's me, Lilly Code, and my friend Spinner the Spider, who's decided to join us today. So thank you so much, and a happy Halloween, everybody. Today we're going to be learning about forms. Sorry, I know it's so silly to crack yourself up so ridiculously, but I just find it quite funny. So we'll get on with this here now. So we'll get on with this here now, and basically we're looking at forms today. So I'm just catching up on Max's video. We're speaking about forms. So forms in React, if you want to input a piece of information on a web page, that's simply a form. So I'm just playing the video here. That's just a form. And by interacting with these, we can do validation on a form. So perhaps when you want to type in an email, it'll give you a pop-up saying if the email is incorrect or if you've misspelt something, you'll get a message telling you that. So this is all forms and form functionality. So we're going to get stuck into this now. I'm just going to get up the files while Max is continuing to explain what's going to happen in this section of the course. So we are on section 16 now of this great course. So we're more than halfway through this course because I've skipped around and I've done a bit more, and there's 30 sections. So we're doing very, very well. And we're on day 42. So yeah, I really do think we'll have this finished before the 100 days, which is super. We'll be much, much better at React. So fantastic. So I'm just going to open up the correct file here. So he's just gone through some slides here at the moment. Okay. So 16, here we go. So I'll just rename this. As always, it's a very long name, so we'll just rename that to 16. Move it into the correct folder, unzip. Because yesterday we were doing a different thing. We were looking at tasks and we made our own custom HTTP hook. So today we're starting a new section of the course, which is forms. And the hooks yesterday was looking at how to make your own custom hook in React in order to send HTTP requests. So check that out if you're interested. Yesterday's video and the day before also covered that. So here we are in our new project 16. So I will open this in code. Great. And yes, I trust the authors. Max. Oh, just closed with code as well. We'll open that back up. And here we go. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So, great. So as always, same old story, guys. When we start a project from someone else's code, like Max's, and it's a React or an Angular project, you know, something with a package.json, you first of all build all those packages using npm start or npm install and then npm start to run the project. So we'll just cd into our project here, code, and then 01 because we're just starting off, and npm install to install all of the files within 01, this package.json, and we'll get an extra folder here, our node modules folder, which contains all these built packages then. Okay, great. So he's starting to get into the code now, just in time, while our npm is building here. Great. Okay. So I hope you all had a lovely weekend and Halloween. I was out enjoying Halloween with my friend Abby, so I hope all of you had a lovely Halloween as well and went out and enjoyed it with some friends. Had a chai tea or, you know, something nice to drink, a nice warm drink, and just enjoyed Halloween. There's loads of fireworks going off. So yeah, happy Halloween, everybody. I hope you like my spider. I just thought, why not? You know, I normally have put in some effort for holidays, so this is the extent of the effort. And I love spiders, so yeah, great. I thought he might bring me luck accompanying me today on our 42nd video of the series. Fantastic. So we're still just waiting for this to load here. Then I'm going to run npm start in order to fire up the project, and then we're going to start building out our form. So it's warning us to do npm audit fix, but just for the sake of efficiency we won't worry about that, and we'll do npm start. If it was my own project, I would run npm audit fix just to make sure that those packages that it's telling me about was fixed. But just to get on and learn a new section, I won't worry about it right now. Cool. Great. So we're just going, so there's our node modules folder that's been built with our npm install. And if we come down in here into our source, we have a simple input, which is just where you can type in your name and input box. So here's the label, and the input here is of type text. So that's what we see here on the screen. This is a form. It has an input, or you know, an action area that the user can put in some information, and then a submit button. So here is our submit button, which, how is this actually getting fired? I don't think the simple input. So at the moment, does anything happen when we do this? Okay, so nothing seems to happen. So yeah, I don't see any submit handler on that button. So we can see here that we don't have any action as of yet. So we're going to add that in. Perfect, that's actually what he's doing right now. So lovely. So down here on our text, we want to add an onChange handler. So we literally just say onChange. So when something changes, we want this handler to run. And I'll open up my parentheses here, and we say name input change handler. Great. And then what we want to do on the input, yeah, on simple input, yeah, okay. So then what we want to do is define this. We need to define this also. So if we come up here, simple input, within here, obviously, because this is the React component function declaration. So this is everything for this function sort of needs to be in here. So we need to go in here now and then declare our new function that we want to use within this component. So we'll say const named input change handler, and this is going to be equal to a function. So we're going to take in an event, and then this is just an arrow function, and then we want to do something when we get that event, when we change something in that box, when we type in something into the name field. So here we're going to say set entered name, and this is going to hook up to a use state variable that's being controlled. So the set, and then when you have the variable name, it's for the use state a lot of the time, or like this is just the convention that's used. You have set and then the name of the function in order to change the variable, but we'll see that now in a moment. So we'll say set entered name, and this will be event.target.value. So what this means is the actual event that's coming in when we press the keyboard. I'll show you all this live once we have this code wrote. But when we come in here into the input box and we type in some text, ABCDE, that is the event.target.value. It's being captured in this event. The event is passing over that information from the key presses, and then we can set the entered name. So we're going to declare a boolean which is called entered name, and this is the function we can call to set entered name, and we're going to set that to the event.target.value, which is literally just the key presses that were typed into that box. So up here now we're going to declare our use state. So we'll say use state. Well, first of all, I'll just say set or entered name. Entered name. Oh, caps lock. And then we have our function to change this entered name. So set entered name. And then this is going to use state, which is a React hook that comes inbuilt in React. So we will use state in order to track the state of this object so we know what the name is, because we're tracking it with useState now. So we'll come up here and we need to import useState now. As soon as we're using it, you need to tell it that you're using it. So we open up our parentheses, useState, our curly brackets I should say, useState, and then we will just say from React. So super, from React. Perfect. And there we go. So now we shouldn't have any errors because I don't see anything wrong there, to be honest. Maybe the fact that we're... No. Okay, so let's just say I should be able to console log out in here. So I'll console log our event.target.value and you'll see exactly what's being set when this handler is called on the change of the input and the event is passed through and the event.target.value is pulled out, so the value of the event, and then set entered name is the function that's called on set state, use state, and the entered name will be assigned to that value now. So if I console log out our event.target.value, perfect, and just come back up here, comma. So the string is just to have a word, a reference. This will come out exactly like that in the console so we can see what's associated with that then. So entered name is assigned but value is never used. I actually had a feeling that was going to happen. Oh yes, so I also need to feed it back into the input box as well. And I should also add a second function because we're going to need a form submission handler as well. So we'll do that first and then we'll see the console log. So const form submission handler, which is going to decide what to do when we submit that form. So this is just another function yet again. So we'll open it up and we'll just say event.prevent default for now. So this prevents the default action. So we'll just do that, and then on submit we'll run this function. There we go. Oh, this should be a function call. Excuse me. So event.prevent default is inbuilt into JavaScript and it prevents the default behavior on certain things in the browser, in the window. So we can call this function on the event to prevent the default action that usually happens on the event because we want to do our own action on it instead. Also, still have some chocolate left over from the trick-or-treaters, so enjoying some wagon wheels and some Twixes here today. Halloween is great. Got to see fireworks, it was lovely. So, expected on submit. So, we have a few errors here. So, let's just see what's going on. So, on submit listener is a function instead of a boolean. Expected on submit listener. So down here on submit listener, okay, should be a boolean. Okay, so use state. So warning, on submit listener index j1 got a value of boolean type at form simple index expected on submit. So this obviously has to only be this function that we're talking about, and it can only be this on submit here because we've just done this, and so it is. And I'm not sure. Expected on submit listener to be a function. Oh, I just didn't do the function brackets or something. What's going on? Okay. So I don't see what's wrong there, you know. Let's try and do it a different way instead of doing it like this, because maybe I've done something wrong. So rather than doing it in an arrow function format, we'll just do it like a regular function syntax. So function form, submission handler, yeah. We'll give our curly brackets, we'll pass in our event, and maybe then we'll be able to see what's going on, or I will. So function form submission handler event, and in here we'll just console log. Well, we can add all of this because that should still stand. There shouldn't be anything wrong there. Shouldn't really be anything wrong anyway, but we'll figure this out. Okay. Okay, great. So it's actually okay. Our error has gone away. And I'm just going to go back to this code now in a minute and see whether it was just because the page hadn't properly been saved and there was in fact nothing wrong. But first of all, we'll just test it. So I'll say Lilly and submit. So there we go. Perfect. So this is what I was explaining, that this event actually holds the value within the target property, and then you can access the value, and you can see for each keystroke it's coming in here. So LLI Lilly. Just a few typos along the way, but we got there eventually, and we have Lilly at the end of it. So perfect. And okay. Oh yes, and then when we click submit, this is our console log of our entered name being console logged out. Excuse me, being console logged out into our console. So we can see that again as well. So that's perfect. So we will continue on. Just gonna eat some Twix while I'm watching the video. Okay, so what we can do now as well is set up use ref. So we're going to create another constant called constant our name input ref, our named input reference, and we will equal this to use ref and import use ref in order to be able to use that functionality. And this is another React hook because it starts with use. So we can just add it into this same object function, or same object import where we have all of our items imported there. Use ref is not defined. So if we reload, because it should be defined, we can see there that it still wasn't entered into the array. So I actually just think that this error was just because it hadn't properly saved yet. So if we just go back now and save, yes. Okay, cool. So yes, it was simply just a case that I should have just reloaded the page. There was nothing wrong, but there you can see the difference of the new arrow style ES6 version of functions, which come in very useful, and the old function definition where you actually use the word function and then you give the function name, you have your parentheses and your curly parentheses. So you can see the differences there between the arrow function and the old school style. Well, not that old school I wouldn't say, but we'll keep on going here. So then in our form submission handler, so we got this ref so we can use it within our form submission handler. So in here what we want to say is const entered value and this is going to be equal to name input ref, and dot current. So perfect. And ref is always an object with a current property. So that's why we can access this current property on the ref. Okay, great. And what we can actually do as well here is what this is pointing to now, the name input ref, is pointing to the entire input reference of name. So the input field. So all of the input fields, you can access the value when you're typing and you want to get the value. So we can access the value from down here as well. And we're going to assign that then to this entered value constant to be used shortly. Okay, so we'll also just console log entered value out just to have a look at what that is as well. So entered value, and I actually, again, I just seen Lilly in the console, so it wasn't really clear to me what that was for a second. So add your string with a bit of a description is what I would recommend for console logs. That's how I prefer to see them anyway. It just makes it more clear for me. So I'll add in the string, which you just add in either single or double quotes, and give it a comma, and there you go. That's all you have to do for your console log. Very handy. And let's check what's going on. So then if we enter a name, let's say Lilly again, and click submit, dun dun dun. So we have an issue, cannot read value, okay, of our const of our undefined form submission handler single input JS line 21. So it cannot read this for us. So let's just see what's gone wrong there. So we have our named input ref dot current dot value, which is assigned to our entered value. Okay, yeah, yeah, okay, and we've called our named input ref up here, and then we have imported useRef. So okay, I'll just keep going for one moment because again I don't see anything wrong. So, but let's just make sure actually, because we should definitely be able to see this. So cannot read properties of undefined reading value. So here, entered value, named input ref, current dot value. So name input ref, use ref, name input ref, okay. So what about in our form submission handler? Yep. Okay. Do we need to put something down on our form that we've forgotten? Or should it just know that the input with the ID of name, like how does it know that the input of the ID of name is the actual input we're talking about? That's the part I don't see how we informed it. So let's just go down and check it. Okay, perfect. Yes, think I was correct. Yes. Great, okay. So we actually missed something. So although we've set up that we want to use ref and we want to use the name input ref, and we've told it what to do with that name input ref, get the current value of it and assign it to entered value, we haven't done anything down in this form to say what the named input ref is. It's not currently linking to any of the inputs. You know, this just says name, but that's not definitively this name input ref. In fact, it's not. It just isn't. You know, we need to actually assign a reference property onto the input element. So we'll do that now. We'll copy name input ref and we'll just copy down, or I should say, bring these down to a new line and just indent them for ease of reading, because we're about to add another property and we just don't want it going right off the edge of the page. So here we will add our ref property and we will add in our curly brackets and pass in that name, the name input ref. So now we have that. So if we try that again, that should be found now. And then we submit. Fingers crossed. Me and Spinny the spider have our fingers crossed. He has all of his legs crossed. So it's going to work. So, was that the right cheek? Oh no, this cheek. He's here. My little old friend. So there we have Lily and entered name Lily. So we see it coming out twice there. We've done it with a reference and with an event. So then you can see how both of those are done. So you hopefully you got all that. So you just put your ref onto your input and use your ref as an import then, and use ref, give it a name, and then you can just come down and with that name access the current value on an input field, and we assign that to entered value. So now we've added that to the event, which is just passing it through see this form submission handler, or on the name input change handler, sorry. So we pass through our event, and then here we're setting our entered name to our event.target.value just from passing in this event into that function. So 2 different ways to do that there. So once we have saved this value into our entered value, what we want to do then, once we have efficiently set it, and we've already set it, we want to set it back to nothing, because we want it to be free for next time we come into this area. So in here in our form submission handler, after our console log, so once we've set our entered value to the named input ref.current.value, then what we want to do is just reset that set entered name back to, so once we've submitted the form, we want to set our entered name back to an empty string. Perfect. So just went down to make a little cup of tea. Delish. And I also went and made a chai tea, because I had one of these out and about today, and now I feel like having one at home. So, cup of tea and a chai tea. I'm treating myself today, and I hope all of yous are too. So now we have our form set back to nothing, and we're just continuing on with setting up this form. So at the moment, Max is just moving on with a test here. And he's talking a good bit. So I'll just listen for a moment. Yes. Okay. So he said it's good to always give form validation back to your user. You know, that's great. We should validate the information to the user. But another place we should validate it is before sending it to the server. So it's all well and good telling your user there's something wrong with the input they've put in, and that's a good idea. But we also need to tell them, we also need to tell the server if something is wrong before we save that information. So we can do checks in both of these places to ensure that that will be the case. So yeah, this is on the user, on the UI, on the form itself. When you get them red error messages, that's purely for user experience UI and not for functionality and like correct, making sure your code is working correctly, which is what the server checks will be for. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so one thing that Max has done here now is created a new thing within this form submission handler. So just to check if we've entered nothing in. So yeah, in our form submission handler here, underneath prevent default, yeah. So here, before we go ahead and use or try to use the entered value, because what if there was no entered value, we can still click this submit button at the moment, and we don't necessarily want that. We want to give some sort of information. Well, that didn't clear. So we can still submit nothing, just like we can submit Lily. So we want to actually avoid that and to give a message saying you must enter a name or something of a similar fashion. So we'll just say if entered name, yeah, is triple equal to an empty string, which is just you know, apostrophe, quotes, single quotes, apostrophe. So you can say if entered name dot trim, and trim will just trim out any white space. So for example, if I was to come down here, let's save this again, because, oh yes, I just need to actually open and close the parentheses of my if statement. You can have an if statement just hanging around like that without the opening and closing parentheses. That's why we're getting that error before I looked at the console. I just knew that one. So if we do a few spaces here, space, we can see that each of these event.target.values are being fired. And that, you know, we just have empty space in here, and we can submit that empty space as well. So it's been submitted even though you can't tell because it's just empty space. So if we come back into what we want to happen, if we have entered empty space, what we're going to do is say return. So if we return out here, what this will do is, in the case that there's no empty space, it will return out of this whole function altogether. So it will come in here, it'll say, on the form submission handler, okay, event.prevent default, it will go down line by line and you know, run each line of code in sequence as it goes down. So then it will come to this if block, and it'll say if entered name dot trim. There are a few caveats to that, so I should probably do a video on like how actually the call stack and stuff works, and once another function is called, what happens there. That's actually a great idea for a video. So I'll just quickly write that down, because I know I learned a lot when I learned about this a bit more in depth. So I'll make a note and move on. So we come in here into this form submission handler. This is fired when we submit the form, because it's hooked to the onSubmit button by this onSubmit inbuilt method or property on the form, which is linked to the submit button. So that's what's going on there. So when we click the submit button, I'm surprised that this doesn't have a type submit on this button to tell it that this is indeed the submit button, but this onSubmit is linked to this button, the button on the form, and I think it's just because it's the only button on the form. Actually, it just knows that this is the submit button because we have a form defined and then a button. So I mean, it must be it must be the button. So then if we go to our form submission handler and click in here, we can see we're passing through the event. It'll execute this line of code. Then it will come into if entered name dot trim. So whatever was entered, and trim out any white space. This just trims out the white space. And then if it is equal to nothing, so if we haven't entered anything, then just return out. So it won't come down and do the rest of this function, which is good because we don't actually have an entered value. So we don't want to set name input ref dot current dot value to entered value because nothing has been entered. So that's okay. So if we save this again and just type in something else, and type in something else here. So how about we type in this just to test first of all, and then I'll get rid of it and do empty spaces so it's still Let's try that again. So it's still logging the keystrokes. I think that's okay because the event is coming in. Let's just check. Yes, so that's on our name input change handler where we have the event coming in. So that's where our event.target.value is being captured. So that's not in this same form submission handler function. So then within here, we're taking the event and we just don't want it to console log out. So let's see if anything happens if we submit. So nothing happened there. And then if I type in one letter and submit, we got entered name, entered value. So without any text being entered, we don't get entered name and entered value being pushed back out into the console, whereas if we do type in something, we do. So in the case that there was nothing there, trims it away and it just leaves that function and doesn't do the rest, assigning the event.target.value to anything. So that's all good, and we'll just move on here. So So now what we're going to do is just set some basic validation on this form. So if we don't type in something correct, we want to add some validation there. So in order to do this, we can just use state again to track the state. So what we'll track the state of is if the entered name is valid. So we'll just add is valid here, like so, and copy that and paste it at the end. So perfect, and save that, and then we can actually use this down below to tell it whether or not we need to show or hide the validation. So we'll start off with the initial state of false to say that it's not true initially. And then what we'll do is down here in our entered name.trim, so if we haven't passed anything in, we'll set this boolean to false. So this is going to tell us whether or not we entered a valid name. That's what that's doing, and if we didn't, then we want to turn on the validation. So here we will set our entered name to false because we didn't pass anything in. So we will say set entered name is valid. So sorry, is valid. So is it valid? No, it's not valid. So we'll set it to false, and then we'll set it to true once we have actually got a name in. Yeah, so once we've made it past here, it is true. And we'll also add in a paragraph down below to say name is not empty. So below our input here, we can just literally add that in. So we'll say P paragraph tag. What's going on now? Like so. And within these paragraph tags, we will just say name is not valid. So name is not valid. Please enter a valid name. Name is not entered, let's say, because valid may be a bit confusing for a user. You know, you should think about the language that you're using for the users that are going to be using your program. So valid is just a bit of a, you know, extraneous word. Name isn't entered, or just even please enter a name, you know, please enter a name, name cannot be blank. That's probably the simplest way of saying it. So these are all the things you should think about when you're configuring something for users and you're setting it up and you want to make it a good user experience for the user. So name cannot be blank. And you can probably think of a much better sentence than this one here now, but just to give you an example of name is not valid probably isn't as clear as please enter a name, name cannot be blank. That's just a bit simpler. And we can conditionally switch or on off this P tag depending on the state of our set entered name. It's so wordy. Set entered name is valid. Set name is valid. Let's just go with set name is valid because, oh sure, look, we'll leave it. But at least then our actual boolean is called entered name is valid, which is better than set entered name is valid. That's just a bit of a mouthful for me for some reason. I don't know why. So in here we'll change this back to a div. That should not be a p tag, I'm sure. And we're missing a div, so I did delete a div down below, which is fine. We'll just add it back in there. And what is going on with my inability to close divs lately? The slash, so you open your less than, that's a less than, greater than, yeah, okay. Just had to make sure. So you open up, it's on. When you start it off, that's when you close off your closing tags. Just the last couple of times I don't know what's happened. I've forgotten that piece of information temporarily, but it's back now. I've made myself aware of it, that it is the beginning of the end tag that you put the / on. So we have that clear now. We can move on. Everyone's like, yeah, how long did you say you've been coding for, girl? So we'll just open up our JSX, our brackets here, curly parentheses, which just allow us to pass through a variable in here from within the component. So we can pass in our variable now that's entered name is valid. And then we do double ampersand to say, and show this piece of code if entered name is valid. So we actually want this to be if entered name is not valid. So we'll also add the exclamation mark and save. And now we should be looking pretty good. There we go. There's our custom message. We've added some validation. We'll add in a name and that should go away. And we see that that is saved to both the entered name and the entered value. So absolutely fantabulous. We're getting on okay with these forms so far. Let's see what else is in store, because Max was explaining at the very beginning of this video of day 42 while I was listening that forms are very complex and there's a lot of complex bits in them. So although this bit may or may not be simple, if it is simple to you, give yourselves a clap. And if it's very difficult, also give yourselves a clap, because you learn as you go and we're learning here together. But he did mention forms were difficult and we haven't really hit the difficult bit yet. So exciting times to come. So, and wherever you're at, guys, practice, just practice. That's all you have to do. And you'll soon be absolutely flying it, I promise. So great. So now what we're going to do is also add a ternary operator here in order to just have a look at what we're doing here. So yeah, we're going to get our ternary set up. And we're going to handle the form in the case that someone touches their mouse into the form. So that's what we're going to do next. Tea is delish. I love coffee, and then sometimes I really like tea. Today is one of those days. I'm gulping it, sorry. It's just like really delish and warm and delish. Oh, perfect, yeah. Yeah. Cool, so we're also going to add an invalid CSS class so that when our form is indeed valid, we actually show different CSS. So that's really nice to see as well. So what we'll do is here we'll just declare another constant and we will call this name input class classes, and we'll assign this now, excuse me, and we'll assign this now to the entered name is valid. So this is where the ternary is coming in. Entered name is valid. If this is true, then we want to set the class name of form control. So we'll just add or just set this string. So form control. Yep. And then in the case that it is false, we will add form control, and another class, so invalid. So how this is working here is this is a ternary statement here. You can look these up, they're very handy. Also a new ES6 function, so, or functionality I should say. So we've declared this constant called named input classes, and what we want to do is check if entered name is valid. So first of all, you give your condition. The first is if it happens to be true, what do you do? And if it happens to be false, what do you do? So that's how a ternary is set up. So you have a question mark and a colon, and you have your question you want answered, true, false. It's like a game. Question, true, false. Who knows? Is the is the answer, but or you know. Yeah. So here we have our entered name is valid, and this is a boolean. So we have our boolean there, and in the case that this is true, we want to do this, assign form control, just create a string form control. And then in the case that it's false, we want the output to be a string, which is form control and invalid, so containing both of these classes. And then we're just obviously going to set this, well, maybe not obviously, you know, until you know, you just don't know. So I really need to stop using the word obviously, because it's just not obvious, you know, until you know. Oh, sorry. So in here, we're going to pass in, actually, this is not what we want to pass in. I jumped the gun there. We want to pass in our constant, which is evaluating. The name input is valid. Entered name is valid. Jeannie Macker Sweeney. The name input class is evaluating. The entered name is valid and checking. If this is true, it's a boolean. So if it's true, this is what will happen. If it's false, this is what will happen. So this is actually what we want to put down here, because this is equal to whatever this evaluates to. So if this is true, this is what this will evaluate to. What named input class will evaluate to is true, then we get form control. If name input class evaluates to false, we get form control invalid. So we'll copy this name instead and paste it down below in our class name. And then we should see different classes, whether or not it's true or false. So let's see if that has worked. Perfect. So it was indeed false, and now we can see our box has gone red, and if we type in Lilly and save, that box has gone back to just being its standard colour. So brilliant. Okay, sorry. Okay, so okay, so we're just going to use effect in this component as well, in our simple input component. So we will import use effect, and we'll just use effect in order to help us do this. So we'll import use effect and copy this and use it down below. So underneath all of our use state declarations here, we will just have use effect, open up our parentheses. This is an arrow function that we are defining, so we'll just set it up like we always do. And what we want to do is check if entered name is valid. So in the case that entered name is valid is true, we'll open up our parentheses and we will console log name input is valid. And we'll also pass in some dependencies here, and what we're dependent on is the entered name is valid. So then every time that changes, or this component changes, we'll run this based on whether the component changes or the entered name is valid changes. So we'll pass that in as a dependency to say we are dependent on this boolean, or this state. We're tracking the state of this. Excusez-moi, excusez-moi. So yeah, I would have thought that. Okay, so yes, cool. Okay, so what we're also going to do, can it read properties of undefined reading trim? Yes. Okay. So down here where we have our trim, entered name, if entered name dot trim. So we didn't type in anything at all, but that still shouldn't have done what it did. Excuse me. So have we not tried to just submit an empty one yet? No? How about if we do some spaces? Had we just not actually tested that? Looks like we hadn't tested that yet. So okay, no problem. What we want to do for the moment is we're just about to create a isTouched state handler. So we'll do that, and that's going to tell us whether or not we've actually come into this box. So we'll create a constant here and call this name is touched, entered name touched, perhaps. Entered name touched, and then we will also say set entered name touched. So set, and I'll just paste that and capitalize this E, set entered name touched, and we will equal this to, not minus, equal it to uState. And also set this to an initial of false, an initial state of false, because in the very beginning, have we touched this field? Have we put our mouse within that field and clicked in there? No, we haven't. So we'll just set it to false for the moment. So I'm not sure if this is still too hot, but no, it's not too hot. It's delicious. Try chai tea, everybody. Really enjoy it. It's very tasty. Tasty and healthy. Loads of great herbs in it. Really good. Herbs, would you call them herbs? Herb spices. Delish. So we'll just continue to use this isTouched now and set that up. So what we actually want to do with the isTouched is, so we have our state and we've set it to false because initially our state is not touched. So we'll keep that. And now we also want to check in here in our named input class, we also want to check whether or not, or around here, whether or not it's touched. So we'll create another constant. Just move my chatty far away. We'll create another constant here and call this name input is invalid. And what we want to do in order to check this is check if our entered name is valid. So we'll just say if our entered name is valid is false. So we need an exclamation mark here just to say false. And if our entered name touched is also false, or no, is, So if our entered name touched is true, so that means if they have touched within that field, and if the name is valid, if the entered name is valid, so the name is not valid, and they haven't touched in the field, or has he just not finished? If it was touched and it's invalid, we want to set the named input is invalid. So we will declare this constant in that case. And now we can use this down below. So now instead we'll use this here, and we'll also use it down below when we're returning our code. So what we want to do is come down here and change this, but this doesn't need to be a negation anymore. We're just checking if it is invalid. So if the name input is invalid, if that's true, then show us the message. So we just also need to invert the way we were looking at our territory conditional here. So first of all, we had if named input is invalid. In the true case, we want to set form control, and then if it's false, set form control invalid. So now if named input is invalid, then we want to, in the true case, switch these classes around, which makes sense because we've sort of switched the name. So one is valid and one is invalid. So they're just set up slightly differently there. So now where is he actually setting this is touched as well. So now we need to set entered name touched. So what we want to do, so I guess once we come into once we type any sort of input, so on our name input class, oh, that's just our class name, sorry. So on our name input change handler, once we come in here, this is touched. As soon as we've come in here, we've touched this input box. So now we can say entered name touched. So we will set entered name touched to true because we have indeed touched it. So we can save that now and have a look at the fruits of our labour. And actually, why not just log out the variable entered name touched to show you the status of it. Max is just very funny. Okay, so So I thought I had missed something, but I hadn't. Okay, so one thing we can do is set the entered name touched. Yes, so did I set the right thing there? Yes, yes. So here we have our set entered name touched as soon as we come into our named input handler. And we can also say that once we have submitted the form that we've also touched. Well, I wouldn't agree with that, but that's what Max is doing. That when we submit the form, then we've touched the field. But when we've submitted the form, all we've really done is press the submit button. Oh, it's just to get the validation. Okay. There's me arguing a small point. Well, everything is up for debate here. That's how we learn, is by critically thinking about things. So get critical, guys. Use the old bean. You know, you were given the old bean for a reason to use it. So within reason. Sometimes don't use it. So if we come in here, not much guidance there on when to and when not to, but I'm sure you can figure that one out yourself. So if we come in here to our form submission handler, once we've actually clicked the button and we have pressed submit, we want to set this set entered name touched to true. So in all other instances, it'll start off as false. So as soon as we do something, it will set it to touched then. So then I'll actually just log it out of when we actually change the name for the moment to see what it's like with Max's recommended place to put this particular piece of code. Setting the entered name is touched. So now if I just click submit, okay, cool. So we did see it very, very quickly there. Maybe you didn't, and I'll probably have to redo these errors. But as soon as we fix the errors in order for you to see the response to clicking this button again. But if I click submit, very quickly you might see, no guarantee, the error message pop up before I get all those errors, and that the validation was shown to say it was touched but there was nothing there. So we're setting our validation on that. So if we click that button, we see that we did indeed see our message. It told us that the name input field cannot be blank, and we'll just check out what's going on here with our errors. So cannot read properties undefined of trim. So it doesn't like that we've passed nothing into trim here, which is totally understandable. So we should also say, right, so the problem is cannot read undefined. Okay, so one way that I can see to fix this, so the problem is that entered name is undefined. So a way that we could fix this is just say if entered name, first of all, and double ampersand to say, this is saying if entered name is true. And if we did this, it would mean if entered name is false. And what that really means is if we have entered name. So in this case, if entered name is true. So first of all, we need to check if we have something. So let's try that and save. And reload this page and see if we now do not get a big crazy error. So we'll put nothing into the input box, click submit, but we did not get our error message. So why was that? So that's because now we haven't set our entered name is valid to false. So what I'll say is if entered name is equal to undefined, and so first I'll put this in its own, let's just see what happens with that. Okay, so we'll try that out first and I'll click submit. So we still don't get our error message. So what I'll do instead is say if entered name dot trim, first of all I'll start off with if entered name is undefined. Then I'll say if entered name dot trim is equal to nothing has been entered, and see how this fares, if that might fix it. So let's go back, and now we are getting failed to compile. return is outside of the function on line 48. So we've closed something off incorrectly here. So line 48 is, this is our return statement here. And these two, we haven't really changed anything down here, so I know it's not them, and we need our closing curly, just our closing parentheses to close off this return statement, and then our other one is to close off the entire component declaration. So we could do with a semicolon there. That's just good practice. I'll save. Don't think that's it though. I know in Angular you don't need them. I don't think you don't need them. No, it's a JavaScript. It's a language feature. It's got nothing got to do with the framework. So you can include or disclude end of line semicolons in JavaScript. But I like to include them anyway because, but then you sort of get into a habit of leaving them out. But I do like to include them. It's just easier to know what's going on. So she says as she puts in stray semicolons at the drop of a hat when people aren't looking. No, we're all looking. I'm only joking. So then we have our constant function declaration here for our named input change handler, which is what's running down below. That all looks fine. Although why is everything gone grey? That's a concern. It's not a concern, but it's a good place to be looking, I feel. So our name input change handler, let's just reopen this and make sure that that's still there. Yes, yeah. And then we have our form submission handler, which is also, so they're there. So they're just not linked correctly. So we have, this is it. That should not be there. That's what I think is going on. Yes, okay. So I accidentally just added in an extra closing curly bracket here, and then this was closing off this function call. So nothing below this was getting rendered anymore because I just accidentally stuck in a parentheses, and rather than telling me the correct line where it was saying, oh, there's a incorrect parentheses here, down on line 48 it said your return is outside of the function. So it was here or something that had happened previous to that. So I'll just go back and save. And now let's see what's happening. And we still have an error, but that's also okay. Cannot read properties undefined of reading value. So I think this is still our same error we had, line 36. No, it's not. Cannot read undefined reading value. Yes. So, like, I'm really not sure if this is the correct solution to this, and Max will come along now in a minute and tell us the correct solution. But just to try and figure this out ourselves, or at least have a go, I'll create an if block and I'll say if named input ref.current.value is not equal to undefined. So is not equal to undefined. And why is this just happening now, you know? So I'm not really sure if I should be going around down this rabbit hole, but until I just continue and see what's happening. But let's do it anyway, you know. Rabbit hole every once in a while is Alice in Wonderland vibes, and we like that. So I'll continue on. So if entered name is undefined. So there I just said if it was undefined, yes. And that's if it is yes, because we were checking if it was undefined and if it hadn't got trimmed. So that's actually logical in my mind, at least. So then down here for our second if block, or up here I should say, where is our if? Nobody knows. Here we go. So if the name input ref.current.value, so we can just say if name input ref.current, no we can't, let's just leave .value is equal to undefined, let's just return so we don't get that error. And we'll save and see what's happening now. Okay. So I'm just going to watch the video for a moment because I know I'm just doing something really silly right now. Okay. Oh my god, it's 10 minutes past. Is it 10 minutes past? Wow, we've gone on for an extra 10 minutes on this Halloween special, you guys. So thanks so much for joining me, Lilly Code, on 100 Days of Code, day 42. If you did like this video, please like and subscribe, and have an absolutely fabulous week, everybody. Thank you for joining me here today. Peace, everybody. Have a lovely, lovely time. Thanks.